crowd. Just the outreach group alone, I think they're going to have about 14. And he took a couple off, so but there's going to be about 14 of them. And then us. And last time I heard, Trinity was planning on bringing some. And just that's a crowd. And I know Brother Craig's invited several others, so and maybe you've invited others, so I don't know how many we may have. But if you could help anybody that would be willing to stay for a few minutes, many hands make light work. We're going to rearrange some tables and try to make that happen. And I think my wife's also got some supplies over here in our van that we may need some help unloading in preparation for Friday night. Come Friday night. Come. Be a part. Support. God's really stirring in our church. How many enjoyed that service Sunday night? Wasn't that great? And I want the Lord to continue to move, and I'm anticipating Him to do that. And so we'll be having our work day on Saturday. Last I checked, it was a 50% chance of rain. So there were some things like flower beds and things like that we're going to end up having to hold off on. Also, the weather's just not been really warm enough to do much out there on the flower beds. But I am continuing with several of the projects. We're going to paint the fellowship hall. Brother Craig's got supplies. If any of you brethren have an extra step ladder, the church has one, I have one. But if you happen to have an 8 or a 10-foot step ladder and would be willing to donate that to the work to be done that day, that would be tremendous. I shouldn't say donate it. You're going to get it back. All right, we'll give it back to you. Let us borrow it's a better idea. But we're going to put some shelving out in the storage. If the weather's cooperative, the plan is to empty a bunch of that storage out in the yard, and some of the ladies are going to go through that. We're going to eliminate some things and organize some things and do all of that as well. And then we've got some other smaller miscellaneous projects, tech-wise, electric-wise, that we'll be doing as well. So if you'd like to come and be a part of that, it'll be at 1 o'clock on Saturday. I'll remind you that the firefighters' chili cook-off is Saturday as well. So that's where we're going to start the day. We're going to take the group over there and feed them chili and then make them work. And so we're going to do that and look forward to that. What else do I need to say? Oh, there's a sign-up sheet in the back. Forgive me for doing all this with the red light on. I don't usually do this, but I had a bunch of announcements tonight. We would like to get a little gift for these Bible school students. If you'd like to participate, totally obviously voluntary. But my wife did ask that, and I think the sign-up sheet may say she just kind of set a $20 or under limit on that, and I think most of us probably wouldn't argue with that anyway. But if you'd like to sponsor a student and just get them a bag of goodies, candy or whatever, see Sister Rachel if you have any more questions about that, because I am totally clueless. But I do know there's a sign-up sheet back there if you'd like to be a part of that. Okay. Let's get into this. I have noticed, tonight I'm going to call this Convictions, Odds and Ends. All right? I have discovered that as I've been really working on this for over a year, or right at it, that I have collected a bunch of miscellaneous thoughts on this subject, either from people or from stuff I've read or scriptures. I mean, I ought to just show you all my scratch paper back there. You would. And I sat down the other night and was like, what on earth is this? And I sat down for a while trying to figure out, and I did. But that being said, there's much that does not fit into a particular category or outline. And so I am going to spend tonight tidying up before we move on, okay? So that's what I'm doing tonight. I'm just I'm rounding some of these thoughts together, and I'm going to give them to you, and they're just going to be part of this odds and ends sermon, okay? I had first of all, there's two important things to evaluate. I had a good conversation with several of our young adults following, and I will get into some Bible before this is over with. I know that we have a habit of wanting to read that first. I'm going to read you some scripture before it's over with, but let me just get started. I had a good conversation with several of our young adults following one of the initial lessons on convictions. And I actually texted that group a day or two after that conversation, and I haven't said anything to them of late, but I have reflected on that conversation quite a bit in the days since. I've thought about what we talked about, and since those young people, I think every one of them that were in that conversation are in this service, I don't want any of them to think that this is me trying to call them out from the pulpit or even to correct them, okay? This is two things that I need to bring up from that conversation, though, that we need to evaluate. Their comments and our conversation together inspired what I need to share with all of you in this moment. Now, I alluded to one of these things in a lesson or two here a while back, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time with this, but I do want to emphasize a little something different here than I did that night. One thing that was said to me in that conversation is, people want to know. Okay? In this conversation on convictions, people want to know. What people? Who are they? And are they seekers? And I talked to you about that. Where are these conversations taking place? Now, these are factors we need to think about. What people? Are they real? Are we talking about, we pulling what we think people are thinking and talking about? Or are there people talking to you about these things? Now, we know that one of our young people did have one person talk to them and bring 3 questions to them. But what people? Who are they? Are they seekers? And this is very important. Where are the conversations taking place? Is it around the water cooler? Is it at Walmart? Is it on the phone? Is it on Facebook? Is it through Messenger? Is it where? The setting for the conversation is important. But most importantly, and this is what I think we need to think about this, just something to evaluate. When you do get asked questions, when people do want to know, these unnamed people, are they willing to talk to those who are the most qualified to answer their questions? Or do they smell blood with you? Oh, I can tell they're not certain about this. So let me talk to them. Now, this is a crude illustration of what I'm getting ready to do, but this, I think it'll get the message across. Now, if you really, well, let's just say, since I just love hypothetical situations, right? Let's say that you had a brain tumor. That's a terrible, crude illustration, but please bear with what I'm trying to say. If you had a brain tumor and you go to this big medical facility that houses all sorts of equipment, all sorts of people, where all these different people work, when you walk into that facility, that medical facility, who are you going to want to talk to? The neurosurgeon or the janitor? I know, that's crude. I just called all of us janitors, right? We want to talk to somebody that's got answers. But one of the things that I've noticed in these controversial matters is that there's little interest in talking to somebody that has got a firm grasp on truth. So we need to evaluate that. That's something from that conversation that I took away from that I don't know whether that'll help you that were in that conversation with me or not, but what I'm getting at there is no, I think you ought to be willing to try to answer things yourself, but don't let them back you into a corner if you don't know. Ask them if they'd be willing to talk with somebody that you know has a better grasp of the Word of God than you do. Okay? Now, another thing that was emphasized in that conversation was the desire to have an answer to these tough questions, right? I mean, somebody asks us, and we won't revisit those 3 difficult questions, but when those questions get asked of us, whatever the question is, why don't you drink? I keep bringing that up. But when that direct question gets asked, we want to be able to provide an adequate, good, and right answer. Now, my response to that expressed desire that night when that young person told me, you know, in so many words, that they wanted to be able to have an answer. And I could hear the desire in the tone of voice in this young person when they told me that. I immediately just bluntly asked, why? Why? Why do you want an answer? Why is it so important to answer these questions just right? Now, based on that conversation, and I'm not going to tell you any more details about that conversation, but based on that conversation, I want to offer these conclusions. And I'm not going to tell you what to do with these things other than recognize them. Okay, I'm just going to observe some things. We want to answer tough questions, and I pressed this young person about this, and they admitted this. We want to answer tough questions right because we care what people think. Right? So we want to be able to provide them an answer that makes them think well of us. Did you know that there are some answers you can give some people that there is absolutely no way that they can evaluate you good after you give them that answer? So you got to be careful. If you care so much what people think, that's the reason why in the last days the Bible says that people are going to heap to themselves teachers. The emphasis on that verse is always upon how there's going to be an apostate group of so-called Christians that are going to try to grab teachers that'll tell them what they want to hear, but lost in the shuffle there is that there are going to be multitudes of teachers that will tell them what they want to hear. You want to be careful about being a person that just tells people what they want to hear because you want them to think good of you. Now, the other thing that this young person said, and this was, I felt like the primary reason, and again, I can't embarrass them. I'd love to just put them on the spot and ask them, but I really feel this way. You're here, you know who I'm talking to right now. This is my evaluation of those 2 things that we talked about. The passion was there. They said, I want to be right. I want to have the right answer. Okay? We want to answer tough questions just right because we want to be right. Now, both of those things can be very powerful factors. I'm just telling you, these are things to evaluate in this matter of convictions. Those things, the fact that you care what people think and the fact that you want to be right, they can be very powerful internal factors that will cause you great turmoil when you get into conversations with people. I mean, if you didn't care about being right, it wouldn't bother you. If you didn't care what people think, you'd just tell them off and go on. But you care. Now, I'm done with that. I told you this is odds and ends. So here's another odd and end thing. Let's talk about the in my opinion dilemma. I want to talk to you about the, in my opinion, dilemma. Now, she has no idea that I'm about to do this. I was very discreet with our young people. I'm not going to be discreet with Sister Charity. I am talking about Sister Charity McGarvey right now, just so everybody knows. I love Sister Charity. Appreciate her so much. Sunday morning, Sister Charity gave her Sunday school report. Were y'all here? I think everybody was here, pretty much, most of you. Sister Charity gave her Sunday school report about what she'd been teaching. I'm not going to get into that, but I wish Brother Charles was here tonight. I heard you saying he wasn't feeling good. She dealt with some controversial stuff in that report, especially that part about bluegrass music. And I don't know if anybody saw Brother Charles's reaction to that little comment. She did get things back on track before she sat down, but I noticed, Sister Charity, before you sat down, you said, and I quote, "in my opinion." Did y'all hear her say that? She said, "in my opinion." Now, "in my opinion" is a key phrase in this whole convictions conversation. Now, I didn't take time because I just wanted to give her the pleasant surprise of talking about her from the pulpit. I'm sure she's thrilled. I didn't ask her to explain what she meant with that phrase, but I'll just tell you how I took it, and I could be misunderstanding. But I took it as a qualifying remark. She wanted us to understand that her strong stance was her opinion. She made some strong comments, and then she said, "in my opinion." Now, that was good. It's often good and absolutely essential to communicate our convictions that way. Okay? Most folks, even those who adamantly disagree with us, this is going to be a reference to the speech before the Congress, but most folks are not going to hold a little sign up. No, we're talking. They'll listen to our opinion. Okay? And they're not going to get up and wave their cane at us either and yell and interrupt us. I'm not usually political, but I've been reading the news and I know what's happened last night. Most folks can accept in my opinion. This is what I thought of, Sister Charity, when you said that. There was something disarming in the way that she presented her position. Are y'all listening to this? I'm talking to you about this, in my opinion, dilemma. So I just want to commend you, Sister Charity. I think you communicated very well, and I hope your class feels that way. But here's the dilemma. We can sometimes present our opinion as if it's less than legit. Are y'all with me? I know I'm going really slow and really quiet. And I don't want you to take any of this personally, Sister Charity, because this is not about you. I'm trying to make a point about, in my opinion. You may not have 100% confidence in chapter and verse. There are things, guess what? And they're going to bring them up to you. Well, where does it say that in the Bible? And you're going to be forced to say, well, in my opinion. You may not always have chapter and verse. You may not always be able to quote it as, "Thus saith the Lord." But I want to caution you, and I want you to get this. Be slow to say, "This is just my opinion." Be slow to say that. Number one, your opinion may be the very thing that influences somebody to do what they need to do. Okay? It may not be chapter and verse, but your positive influence may help them get on the right track Did you know? Did you know that some folks value your opinion? They want to hear what you have to say. Number 2, it's okay for good people to take a strong position for and against something. Okay? So we have this dilemma when it comes to, in our opinion, we feel like we as God's people can't have one. Yeah, you can. It's perfectly fine to have one. Why should the wicked be the only ones who are passionate about something? All right. Odds and ends. Where to start? The honorable mentions. Now, I've been talking to you about where to start on Wednesdays, and I can't spend much time with this, but I wanted to give you 3 extra things you should consider as you get started. Ready? Here we go. Natural growth is best. I've found that you really can't hurry growth. I have a book in my office called Jumpstart Your Growth, and it's a good book by John C. Maxwell, and it's about being very intentional about trying to reach your potential. And that's great. And there's plenty of things that you can do to encourage growth, but in the end, true development is an independent thing. The Bible said when Paul and his company loosed from Paphos, they came to Perga in Pamphylia, and John, departing from them, returned to Jerusalem. That's John Mark. I've preached to you about him on Wednesday many months, year, 2, I don't know how long ago. I don't know if he realized it or not at the time, but that was that departure was a devastating decision for John Mark. It set him back greatly with the Apostle Paul. You can read about that in Acts 15, where the contention was so sharp between him and Barnabas over John Mark. Paul was just adamant about, no, he can't go. So they split company and went their separate ways. But I'm thankful for Barnabas. He took John Mark with him. I'm talking to you about where to start with this convictions deal. It helps if you will just grow naturally. Let me be clear, Barnabas wasn't such an optimist that he didn't recognize the flaws within John Mark. I think he saw all of John Mark's flaws. But I think he was patiently and graciously giving John Mark an opportunity to grow, to develop, to do better. So he said, hey, come on with me. And I just want to testify, I thank God for some patient, gracious mentors who have allowed me to naturally grow. I was having a conversation with Brother Hurst the other day about some things. I talk to him all the time about pastoral things and get counsel from him. And I was reflecting in conversation. It hit me as I was talking out loud. I really can't remember very many times at all where an older minister or mentor took me aside and just really lined me out. Now, there was lots of times, Brother Craig, I needed it. Oh, yeah. But they had different ways of doing it, and they allowed me, they gave me space to grow. And I'm talking to the young people right here, and I'm talking to the adults, all of us. I think John Mark did grow. I think he developed and started doing better. Here's why I think that, Brother Devin. The second gospel in my Bible is Mark. Not only that, Paul later evaluated John Mark to be profitable. I'm quoting, profitable to me for the ministry, 2 Timothy 4:11.
And I think that's so interesting. I don't have time to preach this like I'd like to, but Paul was dealing with the very thing that John Mark had failed at before. He said the ministry, that thing that John Mark left, where he deserted, he went back, he messed up. He wasn't at a place of maturity to answer the bell, so to speak. Bring him, because now he is able. What was the difference? There had been some growth. Where he had been deficient, he was now profitable. Young people, and I really felt like telling our young people this tonight, and this is odds and ends, so I hope this don't feel real disjointed, but I'm just throwing some things at you that I believe the Lord's given me. Your story is not finished yet. You hear me, Katie? Your story's not finished yet. John Mark had some problems whenever he was young, and he needed to grow and grow up. But God helped him, and grow he did. Amen. Sometimes some of us, and I need to talk to the adults right here, sometimes some of us, we have a tendency to be a little more like Paul, right? We're impatient with the John Marks of the world. They ought to do better. And guess what? You're right. They ought to. But if we could be a little more like Barnabas and let John Mark naturally grow and develop, there's some more growth that's going to happen before this is over. Basic decisions need to be firmly made. Honorable mention here. Basic decisions need to be firmly made. In a matter like convictions, all sorts, this is just, it's almost humorous, but it's a serious matter. All sorts of extremely specific scenarios are brought up. You know? I mean, should we really, I don't know, do we need to, is it wrong to wear brass belt buckles? Should we be drinking coffee? And the list goes on and on. I'm just throwing some stuff out there because I'm trying to stay away from the really controversial stuff. But I'm here to tell you, it gets real specific and it gets heated over some very, very specific things. We're trying to figure out how to legislate things down to the most minute detail so that it can just apply to everybody across the board to the most minute detail. Now, stay with me here, because I've told you before, God cares about the details of our lives, and that's true. But remember, young people, remember, please remember, I'm preaching to you about getting started. Where to start? When my wife went to Ohio for that funeral, I kept two of my children, Ian and Kirsten, stayed with me. And anytime my wife goes away, I mean, I crank it into high gear on stuff, try to keep myself busy from missing her too bad. I know that just, isn't that romantic? Yeah. Thank you. Go ahead. Come on. Oh, yeah, there you go. Thank you. I want to be able to hear it maybe. My daughter Kerrigan's room needed to be cleaned. Now, how many of you remember 6-year-olds? If you've ever had a 6-year-old, you know that tidy doesn't really describe them. The world is their toy box. And I went in there and I was just kind of stood there in the doorway for a minute, and I just assessed the carnage, you know. She had shoes in her Barbie dollhouse, you know. I was like, I guess that's the new shoe shelf. And but when I went in there, I didn't go in there and find a little Barbie shoe. Y'all ever seen one of them little Barbie shoes? I mean, they're about that big. And say, okay, let me start with this Barbie shoe, and I got to go find the Barbie foot that goes on, whichever Barbie that is. That, you know what I did? I started out by saying, okay, I'm going to clean this room. That's where it started. And then from there, you know, I found some
dirty clothes, they need to go in the laundry. I started there with that, and some candy packages that didn't get thrown away. Started with that, stuff like that. I think sometimes that we try to just start way at the wrong point. Basic decisions is what I'm preaching about here. When it comes to convictions, I think you need to start where Joshua started. And by the way, and y'all probably know this about me by now, I don't just assume that because everybody's been at Landmark for 100 years that they've made all the basic decisions. Just because you're part of a church culture doesn't mean that you've made all the basic decisions. Here's what Joshua decided in Joshua 24 and 15. If it seem evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land ye dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Now Joshua said a lot there, but the key phrase is, as for me. Basic decision had been made, and it's quite clear that Joshua was serious about it. Okay? Basic, firm decisions about serving God. That's where you need to start. People are trying to figure out the rights and wrongs of, and they ain't even decided whether or not they're serious about serving God. Amen, Pastor. Finally, who's my piano player? She's taking care of a baby. That's you, Macy. Come ahead. You need to be faithful. This stuff could go for a long time. I'm just giving you, 7 minutes worth of stuff, Moreover, it's required in stewards that a man be found faithful. 1 Corinthians 4:2. You probably could quote that verse. Now, did you know the context of that verse is ministry? Okay, he's talking about ministry. He's humbly describing the nature of his and other ministers' responsibilities, and he says, we've got to be faithful. Now, I have no problem putting some pressure, Brother Peyton Faulkner. I have no problem putting some pressure on those who claim to be called. Brother Craig, these guys that preach around here, Brother Tyrell, Brother Bill, Brother Todd, Brother Chris, guys that, I don't have any problem saying, preacher, you need to be faithful. I have no problem looking at myself in the mirror and saying, hey, you need to be faithful. When that alarm goes off, Sister Melissa, and I think, oh my goodness, no. Something inside me, you got to be faithful. But do you also remember that the servant who hears well done is the one who has been faithful? Twice in Matthew, in the parable of the talents, it says that, and once in Luke, in the parable of the pounds. Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Now, Jesus makes no designation as to who these servants are. It seems clear that the one who receives commendation is simply the one who's been faithful. So, the message is not just for the choir leader or the Sunday school teacher or the youth pastor or the missionary. You need to be faithful. Can you be faithful like the servants in the parable of the talents? Man, I can't preach all this like I'd like to, but the Bible said, Sierra, they were faithful
over a few things. Some folks, they blow this faithfulness thing, Brother Todd, so far out of proportion. He said, you've been faithful over a few things. It's not as hard as you think it is to be faithful. You know, the guy in Luke, in the parable of the pounds, he was faithful, and this is what Jesus said, in a very little. But in that very little, I feel the Lord in this house. Hallelujah. Thank you, Brianna, for being a substitute in my wife's class and talking to 2 children. Thank you, Brother Craig, for Sunday after Sunday after Sunday, meeting with 4 teenagers over here. Boy, 4, that ain't a whole lot in retrospect of how many teenagers there are in Lawton. But you're faithful. Thank you, Brother David and Sister Debbie, Sister Haley. And you tell Brother Brandon this for me. Thank you all for being faithful when it was just you guys and maybe a couple others. Faithful over a very little. Jesus wasn't making that statement as a derogatory remark. He was indicating that heaven notices faithfulness. Where do you start? I mean, we just want to have all these answers. And young person that I was talking to, and I'm doing my best to not even look that person's direction. Let me look down here. You young person that has that desire to have the right answers, I can sympathize with that. But I want to tell you in this service, what God's calling you to is to not have the right answers. He's calling you to faithfulness. And I've preached on some odds and ends tonight, but I want you to get ready, because in this altar, what God's going to deal with you about is faithfulness. Can you be faithful? Can you be faithful now? I know I've talked about natural growth, and God has a process in getting you to where He wants you. We've got that diagram over there, Brother Craig drew. But I am confident of this. You can be faithful now. Right now, at this stage in your life, you can be faithful. I'm still talking to you about convictions. Faithfulness is an essential quality in this matter. We're not talking about blind devotion, but rather a commitment to that which is recognized to be grounded and stable. I want to encourage you tonight, check your foundation. Is it a good one? And if it is, and I believe there's a bunch of good foundations in this house tonight. If it is a good foundation, resolve that you're going to build your life upon that and stick to it. See, here's the thing about faithful people. They're consistent. Does that describe you? Are you consistent? Guilt and fear are important motivating factors, but that's not my strategy tonight. I want you to consider these questions. I'm not going to guilt trip you. I'm not going to say shame, shame, shame. You need to quit being unfaithful. And I'm not going to tell you the terrible consequences of being unfaithful. Read the parable of the talents. What can you do? What is something you know
you can do to be more faithful?
How can you translate that into action that's measurable and noticeable,
Both to you and others. Something you can do to be more faithful. I'm not just asking you, though, to evaluate it and recognize it and say, I think I might be able to do better here. How can you start doing better in such a way that everybody notices? There's an acquaintance that I'm not close to, but I know him. We're around the same age, and I know his family. I knew him better when we were young. And to be honest with you, he was kind of a fringe dude. And I lost contact with him for years. But now that I've moved back to Oklahoma, I see him pretty regular. I don't know him real well. I don't know if he's preaching in his local church or his home church where he goes. I don't know if he's a Sunday school teacher, a deacon. I don't know what he is. But all I know is he's just around. And when I see him, and I know it's not just about appearance, but he's dressed nice, he's worshiping, and he's just around. And today, as I was driving down the road, the Lord began to deal with me about him, and something stirred inside of me. You know what God's looking for? Is somebody that'll just be faithful. A stable presence. I've had a lot of conversations with pastors about faithfulness. With my pastor, Brother Hurst, but others. One takeaway that I always come away with when I have a conversation with pastors about it: unfaithfulness is a hard habit to break. That's one takeaway that pastors have shared with me.
In other words, it's hard to get folks to be faithful, especially when they've gotten comfortable being unfaithful. But none of those pastors I talked to ever indicated that they had any intention of giving up on those unfaithful ones. And I don't have any intention of giving up either. I know I wasn't born last night. Sometimes you're unfaithful. There's times you stay home and you know good and well you could have been here. And I won't meddle any more than that. There's other things we talk about faithfulness besides church attendance. But here's the deal. God's not going to quit working with you. And I'm not either. I work for Him. And I believe that God could help you get out of that rut of unfaithfulness tonight. Would you stand with me? It's strange to talk to people that are here on a Wednesday about unfaithfulness, huh? No, it's not. Because we have a tendency to pick and choose what we're going to be faithful to.
You got to quit doing that. You hear me? You got to quit being selective about when and how and what. He just simply wants you to be faithful. And He's going to help you. Lord, I thank you for your presence. This is one of those things that I know that folks are uncomfortable hearing. But God, I thank you for all of the times that some man of God talked to me about being faithful. I thank you for the many times that conviction has fallen in my heart about my need to be more consistent, more stable, more grounded. And Lord, I'm praying that there'll be some folks in this service tonight that'll feel that exact same way, that they'll be grateful for the fact that they've heard instruction about how to get started with a strong, stable life, and that is to be faithful. Heads are bowed, eyes are closed. I'm not going to call you out. We're going to wrap the service up pretty quick here. I think that there's probably somebody here that there's a specific area in your life that you would say, I'm strong in every area except that one. And I struggle with faithfulness in that area. And I believe tonight the Lord would like to help you. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand and acknowledge it. My eyes are closed along with yours. We're just taking a moment to concentrate and think about that. If there's an area in your life where you know you struggle with faithfulness, I want you to talk to God about that in this altar. Would you do that? Ask Him to strengthen you, that you tell Him you want to do better. You want to be more consistent. I want to invite everybody that will. Let's make an altar today. Let's find a place to pray. May the Lord bless you. Hallelujah. God, I want to do better about witnessing.
In the